Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen Carpenter, and with us today is my father, as always. But then we also have a ranch wrangler from our friends at the Days at Dunrovin Ranch. She has business, a bachelor in science in agribusiness and food industry management. She, from her introduction to us this week, she said she's a big animal and people person, and she likes to pick up on people's energy, which is great for today's topic. She's been talking about a lot of self improvement and the things she's done in the last couple of years. And because of that, I have no social media to provide you for giving a plug, but that's perfectly fine. So this morning, we'd like to welcome our dear friend, Ashley Chapin. Hi, Ashley.
Hi,
Hi,
good morning.
Ashley.
So yeah, like we were talking about before we got going on the show today, you're big into energy and enjoying things with people, and you just seem to pick that stuff up. And then obviously with your degree in agribusiness and the food industry, I'm assuming that's what kind of got you over to Dunrovin. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I've been obsessed with horses. I'm sure
Uh-huh.
my parents put me on a pony ride at 3 years old, and that sealed the deal. So it's always been kind of like a dream of mine to work on a horse ranch, and it just, kind of played into the agribusiness degree that I chose. Because when I was going to school, I think I changed my major like 3 or 4 times. It was like
Yep.
nursing and like ultrasound tech, vet tech. I wanted to do something like medical or science related. And then I found that business degree and I was like, oh, that could be practical. Like, I could see myself running my own farm or ranch or something one day. So yeah, just trying to gain little bits and pieces of experience so I could do something on my own one day.
That's awesome. So I know you do a lot of stuff because we have such a good relationship with Suzanne Miller and all of you guys over at the Days at Dunrovin Ranch. Um, that you guys do the Monday socials together, you and my dad. And I know you've been working on a horse called Augie. And my first question is, how did you get thrown into that, so to speak? Because I know my dad he's always had the relationship with Suzanne to kind of start that, and she thought he'd be a valuable asset. How did you? Because I know there used to be another woman that was doing it, and now you've gotten into it. So what brought you into this particular I guess segment of Montana socials?
Suzanne asks questions and then the answer is always yes. Like, I just
That's why I have the gray hair.
Yep.
Right. I was always interested in it. She was like, you want to learn how to train a horse? You want to learn how to train him to pull a sleigh and teach him to be a horse? And I was like, yeah, okay.
Of course.
So, I just got kind of wrangled into it. But I just, I couldn't turn down an opportunity like that.
Well, it's so hard to say no to Suzanne because
yeah,
she just doesn't ask the question. She gives you the vision.
Yeah.
And she just leads you up to it. She's like, you're going to do this.
Serves it on a platter, essentially. She just puts it right there for you to just pick it up and take it.
Well, and she does everything with such passion, and the vision is so clear. It's like, oh, I mean, she just sucks you in. It's like, how can you not do this? Because, and not that it's a pipe dream, it's just something that is so beneficial to not just yourself but others, and it's like, oh, what a way to express what we're doing in a different manner. So yeah, that's easy to get sucked in. So sorry.
Yeah, she has all of these ideas, and it's just like she's just throwing them out there to the universe, and it's just like somebody make them happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Make the impossible possible.
So I'm gonna throw this over to Dad for a couple seconds, just to give us some background with what you do on a Monday morning, or what is the official title? Because I know I'm butchering it right now.
Well, it's with the Dunrovin Ranch.
Yep.
Susanna's got a number of venues. There's Friends of Dunrovin as their nonprofit, and then there's Days at Dunrovin, where they do a lot of educational things. It's a horse dude ranch, correct, Ashley?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Days at Dunrovin is our daily 24/7 streaming service.
There you go. Okay.
Right, and they started basically with a osprey nest that has been there for as long as I've taught clinics at Suzanne's, oh my God, 20 years or longer. And they've always had this osprey nest, and they decided to put up a webcam, and it was so popular that people were not just interested in this osprey nest. They could see all these horses doing things and clinics going on and educational programs, that they were asking more and more about that. And that kind of evolved because people were saying, we want more of this. And So with that, it's just more of Suzanne's ideas about how can we express what we're doing in a real way to more people, and those that have an interest already, but then those that don't even know they have an interest, and get them involved, and teach about, basically different cultures, different ways. Because let's face it, the culture that we have, that you grew up with, is a very narrow niche, and there's
Yeah.
very many subcultures within this culture. So
Yes.
she now has come up with this deal for Montana Socials, and once a week, we just share from our perspective very much what dovetails with what we do with the Hashknife Hangouts. Is we talk about what goes on a daily basis at the ranch and our lifestyle.
And that brings
Mhm.
me to something I didn't think of before. You're talking about our culture being a small culture, and then there's of course subcultures to that. And something I should have asked Ashley and I didn't. Learner for our future guests and those who follow you. Where did you grow up, and what kind of lifestyle did you live? And did it happen to coincide with what you're doing now, or was it completely different? And that you found the agribusiness and that kind of just was like, hey, you know what, this is what I want to do now.
So I actually grew up in Southern California, my entire life, and I even went to college there. As you know, agriculture, or California is one of the biggest agriculture states. A lot of the produce that's produced in the world comes from Central Valley, California.
Mm-hmm.
I never really grew up in the agriculture per se. I kind of like just lived in the suburbs. I was a little city kid. But not far from my hometown, there was another town that they called it like Horsetown, USA. And so everyone there has horses, they've got goats, they've got chickens, they've got everything like that. So I was always very close to agriculture, and I always had a big interest in it, just seeing how like food is grown and how animals are raised. And then when I got to college, my school was actually an agriculture school. So we had a operating farm. We had cattle that they were raising. They had show sheep and goats for FFA. Didn't have any chickens while I was there, but then they have one of the largest Arabian horse breeding programs like in the world.
Okay.
So I was able to work with horses through that venue as well. So I've just always had an interest in animals, and I guess it just kind of drew me to agriculture. And living in Southern California, you always have that opportunity to do so. I mean,
Right.
kind of everyone has horses there too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think going into that, we'll start going into what we were seeing on Monday. So these two people have come together Monday mornings, and you guys are working with the horse named Augie. And I was seeing you were talking about energy, and I know Dad has explained that a little bit. And I don't know how in detail because I can only see so much normally because I'm at work. But I was looking at it, and you guys were discussing energy and how to influence the horse and get him to do what you want to do. And go ahead.
We should probably back up just a little bit, and that what we're doing with Augie is teletraining, which
Oh,
is
right. Yeah.
another one of
Yeah.
Suzanne's visions. And that is because people are so interested in the horses and what they're doing, that it was an educational thing for her to have a trainer who's learning to train, or has been around horses, not unlike what Ashley's done, but hasn't really gone into a super concentrated training regimen, or done a lot of training of horses. I mean, you guys are young. You guys are both in your mid 20s. So your numbers of horses are certainly not in the hundreds, So
Mhm.
this is the opportunity for a group of people to watch how a horse gets trained, but at the same time, we're kind of training the trainer, and the trainer's training the horse. I'm 400 miles away while Ashley is training this horse. And so we call it, or Suzanne calls it teletraining, where I'm remote, and I've come over and I've worked with Ashley a little bit and really given her kind of a crash course in what we do, energy, how you affect it, how you affect the horse, and how you use that with the horse behavior in order to change their behavior and cause training. So that's kind of the
And I think that
background to
made the
this.
world of a difference.
Well, and how can it not? But knowing that
Yeah.
too, I'm not the most articulate guy in the world, and I try to be very demonstrative in my training when I teach people or animals, especially people, because our communication is much more finite and we can train in a much shorter time period. But even the best communicator, communicating to someone who's a very good listener and a very good assimilator of information, and then can apply that, you're probably grabbing what, 5-10% at the most of that information. So that is why there's that continually backup of, okay, you remember when we talked about this, and that's why I'm there on the other end of that, because I could have given Ashley a crash course in how to train, turned them loose and let them struggle and probably mostly fail because you don't have that support. So that's what we're doing with the whole teletraining. So sorry, but that maybe puts it in a little bit better perspective or focus.
Yeah, that is very good. Because that leads towards what happened on Monday, and I was seeing, frankly, not to tear open wounds or rub salt in anything, but it looked like you were struggling, and I could tell because
Yeah.
you got emotional at one point, and you were having a hard time pushing him and getting him. Part of that's, I think, um, you're, if I were to assume, you're tentative on how much to provide as pressure because you don't want to hurt the horse or beat him and stuff like that, or cause that at least that perception that you're beating him when you're not. And then the other thing was you started, like I said, you got emotional, and then you turned around and you walked away, and I was like, he just won. I texted that to my dad and I said, I saw that and he won. And he goes, yep, he absolutely did. And that, talking about Augie winning, because I have, again, growing up having my dad behind my shoulder going, nope, don't do that. I know you want to do this, don't do it, because this is what's going to happen. Here's your repercussions. And I've gotten that experience, and I knew the exact same thing he did, and we were like, yep, he won. So now that's a new thing to overcome going forward, because he won that small battle and whatnot. But the big thing that I saw was just the fact that you guys were trying as much as you can to use your energy. And that's why I asked you to come on, because I thought this would be a great opportunity to discuss essentially our horse training philosophy and stuff like that, because we've never really gone down this rabbit hole for any of our episodes to this point. And so I wanted to see what your take was, what you're learning. And I guess the big thing is we can start with, between you and my dad, what exactly happened on Monday that got you to that point? Why was it so frustrating? Kind of go down that road, and then we can kind of dissect it and discuss the whole topic of energy with animals and humans. So
Yeah. Your guys' audio, it's cutting in and out. I don't know if it's the
really,
internet on my end or your guys' end, but I'm trying my best to follow along.
okay,
That I kind of know where you're going with it. Yeah, I mean, Monday, I thought it was going to start out great because the prior Thursday, I went into the round pen with Augie. We were in there for like 15 minutes. I just kind of like assessed how his leg was. We were just kind of playing around. And then he was actually listening to what I was saying. Basically, I got him to walk and trot. I got him to turn around a couple times, and then we kind of just stopped it, and it was that. And then on Monday, like, he just, hey, he knows when it's training time. He knows when it's time to go to work, and when we're not playing. And so, just further and further into the lesson, he just stopped responding to what I was asking him. I found out afterwards I was using the wrong kind of whip. So it was basically like I wasn't telling him anything. And so he was just like, yeah, I could get away with it. I don't have to listen to you. And so it just kept getting more and more frustrating that I was having to put in more effort. And, I'm a relatively small human being and he's a 1,000-pound horse. I can't
yep,
just push him around and move him. Some horses are more responsive to that. They're like, oh, no, okay, don't touch me. But he's just like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to push you back. He's just like a bratty 17-year-old kid who just doesn't want to listen. And it just gets so frustrating. And now I know what parents of teenagers feel like
and
trying to push them around.
I will also add in there, don't get down on yourself because you're learning
Yep.
this at like 25, 26, or however old you are. I had to learn this at 7. And I know what you're talking about. A small human being trying to push around a big horse. My dad gave me my horse, who's a very large horse, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, hey, make him do what you want. I'm like, I'm 7 years old. I have tiny hands. I don't know how to figure it out. Like that was kind of
Figure it out.
like he helped me obviously, but like that was the gist of it is figure it out because this is a lesson in life. And that's why I'm saying don't get down on yourself at all because you're having to learn this 20 years after I did.
Yeah.
Well,
And even during the lesson or afterwards, you and Suzanne were both like, oh, like you kept your composure. And it's just like, well, yeah, like I can't just blow up on him. He's a horse. He doesn't know what I'm mad about.
Yep.
well, and that's very much the point of the training is that, and this is where the energy comes in, and it's very reflective of what you do. And I've thought a little bit about, I come up with different, ways to get across what training with energy is. And my dad used to tell me way back when, I was in my teens and 20s, my especially my teens growing up when I was learning about energy. And my dad told me, he said, some of these same things. He says, bring your energy up and make yourself feel like this, and they will feel that and they will respond to that. And the caveat to all of that was, don't tell anybody that we're doing this because they'll think you're crazy.
100%.
Right. And so I was probably 40 years old teaching a clinic, and I don't know why I did it. I was like, you know what? Hell with it. I don't care. I'm getting old enough that I've only got 20, 25, 30 years of training left in me. So I dip my toe in the waters talking about your presence instead of energy. And usually clinics they're a very social time. People they're there much to see each other and maybe pick up a tidbit. And there's some that are really studying, but the place has usually got some noise around it and things going on. Well, I started talking about that, and all of a sudden I became aware that because I was wanting to see what people were responding to, or if they were, or how, the place was quiet and people were listening. And then there were some questions coming up, and it was like, oh, we're onto something here. All right, okay. And so that kind of took off from there what it is. But all you're doing is using your emotion to make the horse respond to you. And if their emotion is something you can't control, you still use your emotion to bring their emotions either down or bring them up if they're real lazy. And I was thinking about this morning before we got on. I said, actors are, our Hollywood group are really skilled at changing our emotion in how they act. And I don't know, there's different methods of acting, and not that I know anything about this, it's just, what I picked up from, watching people and interviews of actors. But, some of them really take on a role and they stay in that role for the entire time they're filming as that character, so that they are catching the emotion, the time period. They're trying to really live that and then influence what's going on around them. And it's really what we're doing with training horses, the same kind of thing. It's that emotional change, that emotional control, which is nothing more than energy.
And I would also add to that there actually two things specifically. I know Dad's talking about a specific event where he became kind of the center of attention because of what he was discussing. But there was another time I was thinking about this. I think it was yesterday when I was driving. We never met anybody outside of our family that understood energy or used it until we met another trainer from Minnesota. And we had no idea what she did until she came and visited, and she was doing some of this stuff to a horse in front of us. And I still hadn't quite understood what it was yet, but my dad and my grandpa did, obviously. And they looked at each other and they're like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And afterwards, there was a discussion amongst the three of them about that. And she goes, you can't tell anybody, because that it was, again, and it's still to an extent it is. And this is actually something that I wanted to talk about too. Maybe that's more of a cultural thing. And I would love to get Ashley's take on this, because I think more and more we're, as a world culture, we're much more open to things like Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff like that, and more religions and things that they very much recognize energy. And maybe that's why it's become a lot less taboo, because I definitely remember growing up, you don't talk about that. It stays in the family, and you don't tell anybody else outside of it, because we're going to be laughed out of this place. Like we're going to be just, we will be blackballed for anything. So I'd love to see what you think about that and why maybe it's become more popular and prevalent with people discussing it now.
Yeah, that's interesting that like she didn't want anybody to know, not because it's like a trade secret or because, you know, you can't let her methods get out there or anything like that, but rather that people are not going to receive it well.
Yeah.
But I know like the history of horse training, it's always been like use the brute force, hit them as hard as you can, get them to do this, make them do this, not, you know, taking emotions or energy into the equation. But and I've noticed more recently, you know, since I started working at Dunrovin, I've been watching a lot more horse training and being around horses kind of videos on YouTube. And a lot of them are now talking about the energy exchange and that, you know, creating the bond between you and the horse is much more important than having them, you know, you up here and the horse down here and, you know, just kind of bossing them around. So I think, you know, just in general, the world is becoming more and accepting of like a positive reinforcement kind of training. And then even within like training dogs and stuff like that too, like the clicker training, it's just becoming a lot more acceptable that like you don't just have to be this brute force, you know, hitting them and forcing them to do things. You can actually communicate with them on a different level, and it works out a lot more, you know, fair, I think.
It definitely works out in the sense that they're not going to resent you a whole lot more. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I've met horses that were straight up beaten, and then I thanks to my dad made sure that I was training it as the secondary trainer. And I'll tell you what, granted, one of my first horses, but the training at least doubled. It took me twice as long to get things done. There was one particular thing. She hated ropes because she had been tied up and roped and frankly just abused with ropes. And so it became something much like using energy for positive or negative. Just like and this is where you can make annotations to weird things like Star Wars. You know, there's the Sith and then there's the Jedi, you know, the light and the dark. It's very much the same way with energy. And he used a particular object, which was ropes, to scare her. And it took me all the way up until a couple days before I finally said, okay, you can come pick up your horse, which was 7 months later, that, yeah, she was fine with ropes. But it takes things like what you're saying, positive influence and not trying to negatively affect anything whatsoever and rebuilding that and establishing that rapport time and time again, because otherwise I think you're right. It's going to make things a whole lot more difficult going forward.
Yeah. And it's all about like building trust with the horse. I've noticed, I mean, even since just taking care of Augie, he trusts me a lot more. He follows me around like a little puppy now. But what people don't realize is that when they are still using those, you know, either negative or physically abusive kind of training methods, you still are using energy. You're just using negative, bad energy.
Right.
Through an object. Yeah.
Through an object. Yeah. It's the object is just an extension of yourself.
Yep.
There's a couple of things to do. I'll just do a rhetorical to Calen and to you, Ashley, both, with what you've done so far. Is when you've had difficulties with a horse, have you not learned from that? And you have.
When this can go with anything though, and that's the I think that's the point. Because you know, sports, I was big into wrestling and football, got more into wrestling in high school, and I ended up going and placing 6th after having an abysmal freshman year. So my freshman year, 9 wins, and then I ended up finishing 44 my senior year with a 6th place at the state championship. So you get those things where how do you get there? Through all those failures. Same thing with football, same thing with the military for me, same thing with relationships. I think everybody can go with, you know, hey, that one didn't work out. Well, why didn't it? Oh, it's probably because of this reason. Okay, I need to either fix that or I need to stick to my guns for other things, you know, and then that just transfers over to horses. Horses are a great lesson for life.
They're just a mirror. It's just a reflection of yourself.
Yep. One of the things that I did as a kid is that I did not quite understand, especially when my grandpa was talking about it, because he was not as articulate as my dad was, who was not nearly as articulate as I am. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Grandpa wasn't that articulate either. So
No, it was a matter of, I grew up around some very hard men,
yeah,
but they had this part of this side of them that they knew energy worked. They could harness it, use it, and were really good trainers. But when I was a kid, you really don't get that you're making the type of um, headway that you are. You're saying, I don't know if this is working or not. There's that self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're doing it, you're like, I don't know. Is this really working? Is this real? I'm not getting these results. But then things will happen and you go, oh, okay, this definitely worked. Because part of it is that you're not learning yet or have the control over it like you think you do. It's there, but you just don't really have it focused. And the other part of that is, am I using enough or too much? How can I modulate this energy, of which I can't help having energy. Everybody, we all do.
yeah,
It's how we focus it and how we increase and reduce the the intensity of it to do the good things we want to do. So it took a while for me to really trust that, like, you know what, it just is, and it's happening whether or not I believe it or not. And once I hit that spot, my training went, it just, my ability to train in a shorter amount of time and the product that I was doing with that horse turned out to be much more solid. And so that was a big deal for me, is that trusting that it's real and trusting that I can control it.
yeah.
Your thoughts on that? I mean, both of you. I'm interested to hear that.
I'll let Ashley go.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned, even just working with the herd of horses, that like if you go out there and you're not feeling well, you're not having a good day, they just ignore you. They don't want to be around that. But if I go out there and I'm feeling good and I'm like, yeah, let's get some pets, let's get some attention, they all want to come up to me and say hi and see what I'm up to. So you can tell the difference between how you're feeling and how they're going to respond to it.
Yeah, and then I would say again, a lesson learned is that uh in the last 4 years, because I wasn't dealing with horses and I was dealing 100% with people, I got away from using energy, and it bit
Mm-hmm.
me because I ended up taking all that energy and putting onto myself, and it resulted in some health consequences, particularly the neck region. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like my muscles froze up. I couldn't move my head, stuff like that because of stress. And it's because I'm placing my energy in a negative location. And I want to tell you what, like, you want to talk about emotional people, go into the military. You get some of the most emotional people going back and forth, and it's not all positive.
No,
and
I when I was in high school, I was in the NJROTC program for
uh-huh.
3.5 years, and I thought my trajectory after high school was going to be the military. But the more drill events that we went to, the more we would go to like little mini boot camps and stuff like that, and I saw how people were like
Oh yeah.
emotionally and mentally in the military, and I was just like, that's not for me. That's not what I want to do to myself, basically.
Yep.
But like so the last kind of the first 8 months of the pandemic this year, 2020, I was working at the Good Food Store in Missoula, which is kind of like a health and natural food store. And you can tell with customer service, like you have to have this like upbeat, outgoing, bubbly presence when you're talking to them, like right off the bat. Otherwise, the entire interaction is going to go south.
Right.
And so I noticed, like, on days where I was just over it, I was tired of the people being mad at me because X, Y, and Z is out of stock. I was tired of this. I was tired of that. If I talked to people in just either like a monotone voice or kind of like not upset, but just like over it, they could tell right off the bat. And I got customer complaints to like management and stuff like that because I wasn't this upbeat, bubbly, sunshine and rainbows kind of person. But it's just like, I'm a real human being. I have
Right.
emotions too. I can't be on 24/7
Yep.
just because I'm here behind this counter talking to you doesn't mean that I don't exist as a human anymore.
Well, and
And
it's
so like
also
that was a learning process for me. That was like, you really have to like, go ahead.
oh, well, I was going to say it's also exhausting too, because I'm sure at the end of the day, whether you're providing positive
Mhm.
energy or not, your energy's getting used. Like you're giving out energy for positive stuff, and then you're taking in the bad stuff when it's on the negative day. So it's just, you got to be very cognizant of what you're doing. Otherwise, it can come back and it can bite you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to essentially answer Dad's question, controlling energy both for yourself and for those around you is not only a good thing for you, but it's also a good thing for them. Because if you don't, it makes things easier. I'll tell you that, especially leading people. Oh, I tried being 23 and suddenly you're getting tossed into a job where you're leading 70 people. Not many people get to experience that, especially right out of college. And that was me 3 months after I was out of college. I was leading 70 people every single day, 24/7 for about 3 weeks or 3 months, and suddenly you're like, man, this is draining. And then you got to start reflecting at yourself. Okay, where's my energy going towards? How do I use it the right way? Who can I influence using my energy to help increase the productivity or make sure that everything is essentially hunky dory? But yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely, it's something that I stepped away from for a little bit, and I realized about a little over a year ago, hey, correct yourself, because if you don't, not only is it going to make your personal life better, it's also going to make your professional life better as well. And that's not, like you said, it's not just humans, it's also animals. And animals are probably the best because, like Ashley said, it is a good reflection. It's a mirror of what you already do.
That's a good point. That and as a you're talking about leadership, and that's exactly what I was going to comment on. But uh, you're spot on there. But there's also something that is not just leadership because you're a leader, it's because you're a participant amongst peers. And how you respond to things sets the tone for how you act as a group.
Right.
So always somebody is going to, by default, take a leadership role, even amongst your peers. And it's not necessarily leadership, it is a direction in which everybody's looking to sound for each other and go, yeah, that's a good idea. Even just subconsciously, we do that. And so having that in that text is still something that you should keep in mind, because it's like, okay, we don't need this to get out of hand, or this is really something these people need to do, for a variety of reasons, whether it's a safety issue or whether it's a task or duty or something. So anyway, just throwing that there.
Yeah. Prior to your Monday events with my dad, how often were you using energy and whatnot with the animals at Dunrovin, Ashley?
I'm trying my best to follow along, but the audio just keeps cutting in and out.
Okay,
So
that's all right.
can you just like
Worst case
trace back just a
scenario,
couple steps?
yeah, worst case scenario, I'll put a chat out and we'll do it that way to convey the message. But my big question is, we're talking a lot about energy because it's how I grew up, it's how my dad grew up, it's how we've trained horses for a long time. How did you come into energy? Were you using this because you're doing things like yoga or anything like that prior to this Monday event that you do with my dad? Or did you end up doing it because specifically this event that you work with Dunrovin?
Mm. I think specifically this event, it really put it into words
Okay.
and kind of now had the explanation behind it. But I had always kind of felt that like I could pick up on how people were feeling, or like, if my parents came home from a stressful day at work or something and they're, throwing their bag on the counter, slamming doors and stuff like that. Like I didn't want anything to do with that. I would just stay in my room
Yep.
or like go to my room and get away from it. Like I always felt, this kind of like overwhelming kind of presence when people were, especially in a bad mood. And like I grew up with two single parents, and there was some days were good and happy, and there was a lot of like not so happy days because they both worked two jobs, they had kids to raise, they didn't want to make dinner, they didn't want to do all this stuff. And so I could just always kind of feel that like negative presence, and it really affected me, especially like as a teenager.
Yep.
I'd come home from school after like a long day, and I at class all day, and then I had drill practice, and then I came home and I had to do my homework, and I would go to my mom, and she's sitting in her office, and I was like, hey, like how's your day? And she's just like, I'm busy. And so I could just tell right off the bat that like, I didn't have that good energy to like come home to, and so it kind of stressed me out as a kid. And
Yeah.
it really negatively affected me as a teenager until my mom and I had that discussion like years later. We kind of came back to it, and I was just like, you know, like you didn't give off good, you know, mothering energy. And so that's what affected our relationship. So
Yeah.
I've always kind of known that I could feel that. And then especially working in customer service too, like if someone's having a bad day, they're going to take it out on you. And, you know, sometimes you can bring it back up for them. You can help make them happier, or, you know, they just let them have a bad day, let them walk out of the store with whatever they're feeling. And, you know, sometimes I would like put it upon myself that like, oh, like, you know, I couldn't help that situation, or I couldn't turn it around or anything like that, but it wasn't anything to do with me. It was just me perceiving their energy. And
Right.
so now working with Brandon, he kind of, like I said, put it into words of like, this is what you're bringing to the situation, and this is how your animal or another person is going to react to it.
Yeah. Uh, I guess kind of going down that road, you know, we've discussed a lot about energy so far, and kind of the things that come with it, and how it can affect others. But what's probably some of the biggest lessons you've learned specifically looking at energy and how it either influences you or others while working with my dad on this Monday event?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that you can give it your all, you can give it 110%. And if the other side is just not receiving, then you can't put that on yourself.
Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
So you can't take it personally.
Nope.
So, and then another thing too, I don't know, are you, I'm assuming based off of how cheery you are, you're a pretty high energy person to begin with. Is
Yeah.
that, yeah. So how is it been? Yeah, my dad's nodding vigorously. Uh, how how I'm trying to reword this so it makes the most sense. What has been the hardest part in, because normally, here's how I'll do it. I tend to be a lower energy person. So it's harder for me to get my energy up. There, I have to do things to get myself really like revved up. And a lot of the times it's, I got to think about a sports situation and get my
Yeah,
adrenaline
it's
pumping
cutting
to
out
get my,
again.
okay. So I'm trying to figure out how you are able to bring your energy from high to low, because for me it's difficult going low to high. I normally use like an adrenaline pumping situation, like, oh my gosh, I'm an anchor on a race and I have to win this thing. That gets my adrenaline going. How do you bring yourself down if you are naturally high already on energy?
I don't know. Because I mean, working in the round pen with horses, I feel like I can bring it down, especially to like slow them down. But I've even noticed that like I just have to remember to breathe
Yep.
really, and to just kind of like ground myself and be like, okay, come back down. And like I think with the second or third training session that Brandon and I had when he was actually there, I was he actually put me on a horse, put me on Mystery. And he's a very high energy kind of idiot. And so, you know, we're walking around the round pen, and I'm nervous because this is the first time I've ever been on him. I've seen other people ride him, and he's kind of crazy. And Brandon was like, "What's going on? Like, you're not breathing?" And so I had to remember, like, take a breath, calm down. That's what kind of brings me down. I've kind of learned because I also have, you know, I've struggled with anxiety and panic attacks and things like that too. So bringing myself down has actually been a struggle, and I just have to remember to breathe, just
Yeah.
kind of ground myself, look at something that's like off in the distance that's not moving, you know, count how many branches are in the tree or something like that. Just kind of grounding exercises to bring myself back down. So that's something that I've actually had to work on quite a bit, because I can get pretty worked up and then I'm like just
Right.
even more high energy. um but just remembering that like it's okay, slow it down.
Thoughts are things.
That's true. Yeah. So I guess turning over to dad then, because you've been doing this significantly longer. How do you bring your energy up and down?
Thoughts are things.
Okay. That you're just going to keep it that way. All
Well,
right.
it is. It's how you, if you think it, it is. It is
Yeah.
impossible. Why don't you try this exercise sometime? Do a genuine smile
Right.
and think the most ghastly thing you can and maintain that smile.
You can't.
No, your body won't let you,
Mm-mm.
because your thoughts is a thing that affects your body, right? So that's the whole point of good thinking. And even if you go into a Ashley mentioned self-help, which is great stuff there. But even if you're doing this for nothing more than to make yourself a better person, and believe me, nobody struggles with this more than I do, because I tend to think like a first responder that, or trying to solve problems all the time, because I spent so much of my lifetime doing that. Is you hope for the best, but you're always preparing for the worst. You're always looking. So you have that mindset of, I'm looking for this negative thing to happen. Change that thought. But you're hoping for the best. And it's such a paradox to be in. But if you can make yourself better just thinking that, that's the thing. What I also try to do is not just that thought, but I try to remember an event that caused that to happen. What you do to rev yourself up. Like being the anchor of a track race on a mile run or something, or then if you can equate that or tie that thought to an event that's happened in the past, and especially an emotional event, and that's where we get into more with the emotions, because there's only a couple of ways that we all learn. One is through repetitive action, that we really get that into learning into long-term memory, not short-term memory. This training is not a short-term memory type of event. It's a long-term memory, because you want that training to stay. You want that horse to go away 2 years, come back, never be touched, and be able to get on them and do what you were doing, maybe a little rusty, but certainly be able to perform. Long-term memory takes place by a single emotional event or repetitive events, so much that it just becomes ingrained in the body. So if you can grab an emotional event that took place with you that is positive, or brings that energy up or brings that energy down, you grab onto that. That helps your body do that. So thoughts are things, and thoughts going back into the file system in your noggin will take you to that emotional spot where you were. And that is a big way in order to control that and have that happen. So that, to me, is the biggest driver and the biggest way to do that. So it becomes very easy for me anymore. I mean, it has for the last, I don't know, God, 20 years probably, at least, maybe longer.
But
25.
it also took, it's one of those things where, going back all the way to the beginning of this conversation, Ashley, don't get down on yourself, because it probably took him 30 years to get to that point. So it's not an overnight thing. And I'm still learning a whole lot. I mean, again, influencing people, stuff like that.
You guys, I'm still learning. I'll have trouble with a horse. I'm going, what am I doing? I first ask myself, what am I doing wrong? Is there something I can be doing better to help this horse? And sometimes you get a horse that's just a knothead. Have you ever met a person who's just a knothead? Yeah. So, I mean, that happens.
All right. That concludes this week's episode. We will continue with that next week as a part 2 with Ashley Chapin on the topic of energy. And we hope to see you then. As always, thanks until you're better paid.